local MP for Lee. Originally came from Birkenhead, so we can't call him a Scouser.
No.
Adrian. Oh, well, that's all right then. False information from the spread. So,
born it, that's where he was born. You've got this obsession.
you never said anything.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Chair. Hello, everybody. Sorry to be a bit late getting to you. God dear me, I'm offended there. I'll just speak a little bit about the NHS, the state of the NHS at the moment, and our plans for the NHS. But the main thing is really to get into your questions, because I'd rather kind of have an open discussion about how it seems to you, and in terms of what's happening to the NHS. Quite honestly, I don't think it has ever faced a bigger threat than it faces right now. Nye Bevan, you'll know the words, said, there will be an NHS for as long as there are folk with faith to fight for it. And honestly, I don't believe those words have ever been more relevant than they are today. If you look in the Mirror today, there's a story that says that in the last year, there's been a 12% increase in private work in NHS hospitals. A 12% increase in 1 year. And that all comes from, in the Health and Social Care Act, the provision to allow hospitals to earn up to 49% of their income from the treatment of private patients. The half privatisation of hospitals, that's basically what it allows. And it gets worse actually, because what's going on across the country, and we're going to kind of expose this at the conference, at our conference next week. What is happening is local GP commissioners are restricting care. So they're basically putting restrictions on knee operations, hip operations, cataracts. And obviously that then leaves empty beds in hospitals, because the same amount of work, the volume of work is not going through. So what do those trusts do? They fill those, they've now got the freedom to fill those beds with private patients. So they then go to the people who are denied operations. Oh well, come and have it, come and pay for it. There's a bed, and that is what's happening. And if that isn't an attack on the kind of founding values of the NHS, then I don't know what is. The idea that NHS beds funded by taxpayers' money, public hospitals, are now being turned over to the priority treatment of people who are going to pay. And it's not just that they, people who are loaded. This is people who've got no choice, because their local commissioner is saying, well, we're not paying for that anymore. So that's what's happening. But it's just the tip of the iceberg, to be honest. If you look across the system, the pace and scale of privatisation is really ramping up, as we said it would when this bill went through. And it really then, to be honest, this is where we the Labour Party, got to ask some honest questions. Faced with this, what do we do? And I'm sure, you will say, well, didn't you let the market in? Wasn't this part of what Labour did when we were in government? In part, I'd agree with you, and I'd say at the beginning what I want to say today. I believe we let the market in too far. I'm absolutely clear about that. I don't mind saying it. Labour let the market in too far. And the problem with that is that if you carry on letting it in, eventually it devours what's precious about the system, isn't it? That service that puts people before profits. That, to be honest, is what the NHS still is. I know we can all have our gripes about the way in which things have changed, but 2013, it is still today a service that when people walk through the door, it doesn't matter, who you are, what you've got, what you earn, what job you do, how much money you've got. You still get treated on the basis of your need, and that is a precious thing. But if we carry on down this path, then eventually it will be destroyed by the market, and that is what is now beginning to happen in a way that I don't think has ever happened before. The difference between us was there's two differences. We brought in extra capacity to bring down waiting lists. People will remember my dad had a heart bypass at the Broad Green just 2009, and he waited about 8 weeks to go through there. It wasn't just because he was my dad, by the way, it was because I was health secretary at the time. That was what the waiting time was, and I checked what the waiting times were at Broad Green in 1996. 2 years people were waiting to get heart bypass operations at Broad Green. They weren't just having bad care in hospitals, they were dying on NHS waiting lists. So we did a huge amount to bring down the waiting times. And yes, that was partly by adding extra capacity. The difference is now they are replacing core NHS capacity with the private sector. They're not adding extra capacity to the public core of the NHS. But you know, as I say, in truth, I think there was someone on our side who wanted to go down this path of more and more privatisation, marketisation. I just don't believe it, and I will say to our conference next week that I have never seen. I don't believe in the NHS as a kind of empty or hollow blue and white logo that can sit on the headed paper of any qualified provider. I don't believe in that. I believe in the public NHS. That is what I believe in. I believe that the people who work in the public NHS give more to it because of what it is, because it isn't a system that sees pound signs rather than people. And that's why they give more of themselves. And if politicians don't understand the value of the NHS and don't understand that basic motivation of NHS staff, then quite honestly, then we'll never understand the value of what we've got in the National Health Service, which is, without doubt, the best thing about this country, the thing we should be proudest of. So I'm going to say all of that, and I'm going to make it clear again that we'll repeal Cameron's bill. That'll be the first thing that we do. Restore an NHS based on integration over fragmentation, collaboration before competition, people before profits. And you know, you might think, okay, well, it's easy to say it now in opposition. You know, we can all come up with all these fine statements now. Is what they did when they were government. But I just would remind you, I brought through the NHS preferred provider policy when I was in government, to the dislike of some on my own side at the time. I changed it from this idea of any willing provider. I don't believe in that. So I hope that gives you some confidence that I mean what I say. And I actually think it's one of those issues where the public is with us. I think this isn't really a left-right issue. You know, you could have a debate about privatisation in other areas, and you know, some people might support it, some people might not. I think when you look at health and care, people of left and right believe in public provision, NHS provision, and you know that is basically the foundation on which we should build a Labour policy. And let's give people a really clear choice at the next election. A market-based system, which is where it's heading at the moment, or a system that is true to the values that created the NHS. And you know, I think that is, we have to have that debate at the next election, because we didn't at the last one. You know, Cameron was doing all this stuff about, oh, I love the NHS and no top-down reorganisation, everything's going to stay as it is. And you know, that was a massive betrayal when he came in and he ripped the whole thing up, threw it all upside down. Yeah, here's a fact actually that don't tweet this one out yet, because this is one for my speech next week, but I'll give you a sneak preview. We have worked out that 3 private health companies, who between them since 2010 have donated £2.5 million to the Tory party, have since 2010 secured £2.5 billion in NHS contracts. That's for every £1 donation to the Tory party, £1,000 back in NHS work. Now, you know, we've got our own local difficulties, internal difficulties, haven't we, on party funding at the moment?
I think we'll touch on that after.
We might touch on that. I thought you might say that. But, you know, let's just put that aside for 1 minute. That thing that I've just told you, that is the real scandal in the funding of political parties in Britain, not anything that we do. And by the way, just let me say on that, I mean, in an era when nobody could go to the people out there and say, let's have more state funding for political parties. I mean, who could, you know, we couldn't, in all conscience, do that. I believe that the Union Link is, if you didn't have it, you'd have to invent it. To raise money off a lot of individual people in contributions is the only way to fund a political party, in my view. So, you know, we mustn't ever lose our history as well and our roots. So that's where, you know, those are the big differences. What's the Cameron market, and then a policy that hopefully you would say is a recognisably Labour policy. But the last kind of thing I just wanted to talk to you about is how, for me, it's about more than the NHS. It's about social care as well. Because if you know, the reason why people might be wary of privatisation or mandatory contracting in the NHS is because they will look at social care, and they will look at what's happened to social care over the last 20 years. And what is social care in England today? It is a malnourished, minimum wage, 0 hours business, basically, dishing out care in 15-minute slots where, I don't know, there's probably not even time to make a cup of tea, let alone have a conversation. That is what it is. And I am really clear that that system will never ever provide the standard of care that everybody wants for themselves, for their parents, or indeed anybody's parents. The system we have today is basically saying to young people who might leave school and go and work in care that looking after somebody else's parents is the lowest calling that society you can answer. It's basically the lowest of the low. It's basically what we're saying because of the way that people who do those jobs are treated. And that, for me, in the 21st century, is a scandal. It's got to end. And it's why next week at the Labour conference, I'm proposing the full integration of health and social care. I mean, in effect, the transfer of social care to the NHS. That's what I want. I want to see a system, a service, that can look after the whole person. It's a simple thing. One service to look after the whole person. The NHS, 65 years old this year, and a great thing to celebrate. But we have basically said for 65 years, that bit of you is done over there by the council, and this bit over here by the NHS. And that isn't and hasn't provided people with the standard of care that they are looking for. It doesn't, they get passed from pillar to post, tell the same stories to everybody who comes through the door. You're familiar with the frustrations people feel with that kind of system. I'm saying, let's have a kind of, not just defend the NHS message, let's build on the Bevan vision. Let's have one service looks after the whole person, physical, mental and social. And that is the way to me to build the kind of health service that is needed in the 21st century. And my final point is this, if I can persuade the party to go big and bold on that vision, and I want them to, by the way, I want us to pledge to go the whole way, basically, and pay for social care differently. Don't leave people subject to these charges, random charges, care charges, but have an all-in system where everybody is covered, but everybody gets the care that they need. Imagine if we could deliver that. Imagine what a powerful policy that would be. That would be, for me, Labour back to what it should be. A policy that's based on our values and our philosophy, and the public out there can say, right, well, we know that, we understand that, we understand what they do with the NHS, and now we understand why, when ageing is the big issue that everyone's facing, why they're saying that. And we like the idea that people won't just have everything they work for taken off them when they get into later life. And the final point is this political point. That, in my view, is the answer to what we all get now when we knock on doors at election time, and any of you do it for us or for other parties. What is it you get? The minute the door opens, there's no point, you're all the same. That's what you get.
The bedroom text, to be quite honest with you.
Well, you get that as well, yeah. And and we need an answer there. But you get that, no point, you're all the same. And my question to our conference next week will be, how much longer are we going to hear that and not actually do anything about it? Just carry on. Because I think what's been happening over a long period of time now is all parties have been scrabbling over a tiny bit of the centre ground, coming up with these little gimmicky policies designed to get a few sound bites, a few headlines, but not actually designed to do anything substantial and fundamentally answer the worries that people have about life today. And in my area, in this whole area of health and care, what are those worries? The worries are that your mum or your dad or your children or people who need care, if you're not around, are not going to get the care that will give them proper, decent life. That's the deep worry that people have. People fear old age and what it might mean. Left to fend for yourself now. So I'm saying that if we answer those questions with proper policies that are true to our values, the public will reward us, and that is where politics reconnects with people. It's no surprise to me that politics is in a pretty low state. It's because it's been trading in pretty kind of minimal soundbite politics for a long time, and the time has come really to change it. And I hope my party's got the guts to change it. Well, that's what I'm encouraging it to do. I think this area is an area where if we go bold, then we win big. Simple as that. And you know, that's what the country needs. Whoever the things we got wrong when we were in government, I know right now your members, the people of this city, can't have 2 terms of Cameron. If they do, we will be letting them down big time. So we've got to have policies and energy and momentum now to kind of win the next election, and bring in policies that are going to give people answers, proper Labour policies, and that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much.
Just before we go to questions, I think when you sat down you said you had a meeting in the Royal.
I do, yeah.
Were you aware at the AGM last week there was £7 million surplus last year?
No. Right, I'll ask them about that.
And we can't get nurses.
Yeah.
So on one hand we've got a government making 4,000, 6,000 nurses redundant and paying them off, and we can't get nurses anywhere. When the Royal opened, it was 844 beds. I went there in October 79. There were 6 single beds and 4 24-bedded, 6-bed, 4-bed, 6-bed, 4-bed.
Yeah.
But there was private patients for 6 beds only.
In the whole hospital?
No, that was on each ward.
Right.
And it wasn't necessarily used for a private patient, but if you needed an infection or something like that, you were put in there. And it then got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's 1,200 beds now, sort of thing, But I mean, we couldn't cope at that time. But the worst thing of the lot is the standard of teaching nurses. The quality of nurses is absolutely appalling now. You used to get 3 years to become a state registered nurse. Maggie Thatcher, when it opened the Royal 79, where it is now, we had a big college. She shut it, made it into a bloody gym. And then they moved them down to Dale Street to be nurses. Because I had to go down and address them and say, do you want to join our union and stuff like that, But anyway, I could go on for days.
You could, yeah.
So that's what I'm saying is, can you make the questions, as quick, short
A
as
question,
possible?
not a question we want, not a statement.
Yeah.
Ray, do you want to say who you are and where you work?
Ray Carrot, I work for the GMB, but prior to that I worked for 30 years in the ambulance service. And listening to what you were saying before, Andy, I should say as well, I'm a card-carrying member of the Labour Party. I have no intention of ripping my card up or anything, but even working within the party to get things done and persuading people like you to do things. But I'm concerned when you say that we let the private companies in too far, which implies that you believe there is a role for private companies within the NHS. I personally believe there's no role for any private company anywhere in the National Health Service. And when you said what's going on now is the tip of the iceberg, it's a good analogy, because 2/3 of an iceberg are below water, and that 2/3 happened on your watch, not you individually, Labour's watch. When in 2003 you introduced payment by results, in 2004 you introduced foundation results. Right throughout your period of office you massively increased PFI. Most tellingly, you introduced the independent sector treatment centres, and that allowed private companies a foot in the door of the NHS. The so-called GP commissioning had its predecessor under Labour's framework for procuring external support for commissioners. The key word, external. For external, read private. In 2009, you introduced personal care budgets, which piloted situations with people with long-term complex medical conditions could have top-up through private insurance companies. That completely undermines an NHS funded publicly through general taxation. You allowed, you basically laid the foundation stones for everything that the 2012 Health and Social Care Act has introduced. And given that kind of track record, Andy, how on earth can we ask people, and I ask because I go on a knocker too, how can we ask people to vote Labour?
Well, just I'll answer directly your question, but let me then, you paint a picture of a record that is like, it was all awful. So let me just then put the kind of counter to that. When we left office in 2010, NHS waiting lists were at their lowest ever level. And public satisfaction with the NHS was at its highest ever level. The public NHS, so we must have done something right, because the public could see a much better NHS, and so confidence and trust in the NHS was higher, belief in it was higher. You know, it was on its arse, wasn't it, in 1997? It was kind of on the way out. So we must have done something right. And the public NHS grew massively under us, massively. You know, the amount of doctors, the amount of staff, you know, the size of the kind of core public NHS grew. I wouldn't want to give you a percentage figure that's wrong, but it was a big. Anyway, let's put it that way. But here I meet you halfway. You know, some of the things that we did were done to bring in extra capacity quickly, because the private sector had capacity, and so that was used to bring down waiting lists. And the thing that I would say, you know, I don't want to kind of like, you know, I'm not trying to kind of skirt your main point, but in the end, we use the private sector for the benefit of the NHS. Just let me explain that. In '97, when people were waiting for those years on waiting lists, basically the private sector was like a vulture on the back of the NHS, you know, going to those people saying, well, but you can come and pay for it and get it done straight away. It fed off the failure of the NHS. As the NHS got better under us, because we invested in it, the private sector's selling point was going, because people were getting decent treatment on the NHS, therefore they didn't have a reason to pay for it anymore. So the private sector had to kind of throw its lot in and say, well, we'll make this capacity available to NHS patients. So we almost kind of, you know, subverted the whole thing. Now, I agree with some way halfway, as I say, because I think we let the market in too far, and I changed that as health secretary. You know, we had a policy of any willing provider. I don't believe in that. I genuinely do not believe in that. And I changed it to NHS preferred provider. When you say that there should be never a role, I don't even think NIBE ever achieved that. I mean, there's always been a role, but it's been a kind of marginal role or a supporting role. And I don't think it's right to say, you know, if something's failing, that you don't, if an NHS service is failing, you say, oh, tough luck, you just got to stick with it because NHS or nothing. I don't think in the modern world that's going to do it. But
you don't really think I'm saying that either, do you?
Well, I think you said no role at all.
Yeah, I did say that.
Yeah.
But if something in the NHS is failing, let's fix it.
Yeah, I agree with you. The NHS preferred provider is all about that. It's all about first chance for the NHS to change. You know, that's what it's about. So I can go. You know, if we open the door, as you said, or laid the stones, the Health and Social Care Act 2012 takes the door off its hinges and opens the floodgates as well. I mean, if they were just doing what we were doing, they wouldn't have needed legislation, would they? But they did. They had a 300-page bill that basically turns the whole thing into a full market. I mean, Section 75 regulations are like compulsory competitive tendering for local government. It's exactly the same. You know, they're being forced to put all contracts out. That is a world away from what was happening when we were in. But you know, I hear what you're saying. I hope you can hear enough in what I'm saying to get some confidence that an NHS based on its traditional values is what I believe in, the same as what you believe in. In the end, I'm quite clear. You know, the thing that Danny Boyle celebrated at the Olympic Games gets destroyed by the market. He was celebrating people before profits, wasn't he? That's what he was doing. And if you just carry on letting this market in, it will eventually devour it and it will destroy it. And I'm really clear about that. And you'll see in my speech to the conference that I'm actually saying to the party, it's time for us to make a decisive break with all of that market experiment. Clear break. For two reasons. Market systems cost more than planned systems like the NHS. But market systems deliver the wrong answer to what the 21st century challenge is. They deliver fragmentation when what we need is integration. And basically that's what I will say. So, you know, I hear what you're saying, but I've tried to give you an honest answer to the point.
G?
Yeah, it was really interesting to hear what you said about going big.
G, you tell them.
Sorry, Giovanna Holt, I'm a full-time officer. It's really interesting that bit about going big, because as a trade union officer, not just dealing with people in the NHS and employees in the NHS, but just members in general, there has been such a volume of increase in mental health problems directly linked to austerity. There's no two ways about it, poverty and austerity. And there isn't the support there. In the local authority that I looked after, the first slashing of jobs 800 jobs had to go, 608 went into social care. Bang. Biggest group. And that council now provides statutory minimum care. There is nothing, basically. They're dependent on relatives who, again, can't cope. They're on 0 hours contracts. They're flexing around to try and get the time that they need to care for people. It's absolutely appalling. And, you know, I don't think the issue is that people don't trust you. But the concern for me was, you were saying, I want this and I want that, and I'm not hearing that the Labour Party wants this and the Labour Party wants that. And that's my concern, because a lot of your grassroots people don't trust the Labour Party as it is, because they're silent. They're so silent on so many things about, we won't reverse bedroom tax. The minute an MP says, yes we will, they're slapped down. There's no about reversing austerity, but if you linked social care into the health service, that's one way of reversing some of the austerity. And to be honest, I think you either go big or go home. That's it.
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. And I think, you know, your point, I think if you look at what's happened to, let's say, the bottom third in society since the coalition came in, that explains what you're describing, that lack of security, that, you know, the effect on people's mental health and well-being of being on a 0 hours contract. I mean, I'm just really clear about this. How can anybody kind of have proper family life if you don't know what's coming into them? You know, how can you have that? And therefore, how can you have strong communities? And for me, it's the new form. It's just a, you know, more modern form of the same issue that you see down the ages. I did say ban 0 hours contracts, and that's what I've said, and it's what I believe, because I don't see how they can build the kind of country we all want to live in. You know, where some people have all the security they need to live their life and get loans and get mortgages and everything, and other people are living a kind of an existence where they're just strung out trying to make it work from 1 week to the next. That's just not right. So, you know, I think we need to explain more to people what it means to be on a 0 hours contract. I think people hear the phrase and they've not really clocked it yet. But there's another thing as well I think we need to point to, which is part-time. You know, Cameron's always there, 1 million private sector jobs or whatever. I see it in Lee. What's happening is people who are on full-time jobs are being given 23-hour contracts. So they're just under the threshold for all of the add-ons. And then, you know, there's 2 full-time jobs being made into 2 23-hour jobs. And that's what's happening, and again, that's the same thing like 0 hours, isn't it? They've got no protection. They're in a very insecure position. And as you rightly say, what then is the knock-on the mental health and well-being of the country? And there's already evidence to show it. The suicide rate, I'm afraid, is going up quite significantly at the moment, because the cumulative effect of welfare reform combined with council cuts and NHS cuts is that certain people who are way beneath the media radar are getting really kind of hurt badly by the kind of combined effect of some of these policies. And then the bedroom tax you mentioned as well. And the same people are kind of almost getting hit from all angles, aren't they, with some of these things. And yeah, you finish by saying I'm saying the same thing. You know, it's time for big answers, or what are we all about?
Yeah.
And maybe not everybody agrees with me in the party, but I'm really clearly in that position.
Thank you. My name's Gary Owen. I'm GMB steward at Asda Distribution. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. The reason I'm coming so early, Giovanna mentioned grassroots, so I thought it was appropriate to talk about grassroots and talk about prescription charges. I see many low-income families who are giving prescriptions and not actually cashing them in till the end of the month, purely because they can't afford them. That would be a big statement for you going forward, to make some kind of reduction there, a bit like the Welsh model and the Scottish model. I think that would be a big statement, because people would understand that. It's not very complicated. We don't have to go into sort of the realms of how the industry works. We just have to give them that clear message. You need support, because these people are not getting the drugs and the treatment that they deserve.
Yeah. Well said. I think one of the things you'll see next week is the conference is all about cost of Cameron or cost of living. It's all very much focused.
Giving you a speech away.
Yeah, no, I've already done that, I think. It's all about that, and it's those kind of issues, I think, that people can understand straight away, can't they? And they can...
You can recognise.
Yeah, but it's also... The evidence from Scotland and Wales is, I think, it helps improve the health of... people don't delay getting treatment. One of the things that's really kind of... Well, you could guess it anyway, but it's really come home to me. With the pressure on A&E, I've been going into A&Es around the country asking staff about, what's driving, what do they think has been behind it. And they were saying that the increase in the last 2 years of dental pain patients. So people basically, as austerity is bit, are just not going to the dentist. It stands to reason, doesn't it? But that's what happens if you restrict or increase charges for treatment. You just basically push people to the more expensive end of the system because they don't get it, they get more ill, and therefore they end up costing much more in A&E. It's the same with prescription charges. If people don't get what they need, they're going to make themselves more ill, aren't they? And then it will cost the NHS more money to put it right. So you make a really good point. It's both a good point in terms of policies that connect with the public, but it's also a good point in terms of health policy and the health of the nation. So
Okay, thank you.
I just want to bring up the point of my name's Bernie Cleary from Liverpool Airport, from the GMB student. I want to disagree on the point where you said it's a left and a right thing. This is a fundamental and ideological attack by the right on the left. Simple as that. This was built for the people who couldn't afford to pay for the doctor when they come around knocking on the door and all that. And these people now are creating a system where the poorest people in the society will suffer. So when you say it's a right and a left thing, it's not. It's to do with socialism. It's that dirty word that the Labour Party under the New Labour didn't want to talk about. Socialism, and that's what it's all about. These on the right want that wiped out of history, and that's what my point is, that we can't do that, and this is what it's all about. It's all about that thing. It's an ideology and a fundamental attack on the working people of this country, and that's one of the reasons why the NHS to stay, and has to stay at the point of call. When you walk in that door, you get treated, and that's what the old thing. And we need to stand up and start saying. And I will say about the Labour Party, they haven't stood up there and fought for it. They just accepted that it was one of them things that was always going to be there, and you open the door and let them come through. And as you say, the apocalypse come running through the door. They're just going to rape it clean and just walk away. And in the end, it'll end up like America, where they put more pounds in from the public purse to run a system because there's no competition in it whatsoever. As you said the other day, an NHS hip in the UK costs about £12,000. In America, it's £100,000 for the same operation, and the governments are funding that for private companies. So I just want to know, fundamentally, we've got to stand up. Another thing, it's an attack also on the people themselves, because they want to get the pensions.
Question.
The thing is that
Just a question.
you know what I mean. The problem is that he wants us all to die early so we don't have to pay his pension. And the problem is the NHS is what keeps us living.
That's the question.
I think I probably didn't explain what I was saying very well. What I was saying was, the NHS is the best example of socialism that this country's ever. That's what Nye Bevan called it. He said it was what did he say in one of his speeches in the 50s? It was, a little piece of socialism, a little piece of Christianity too. It was a great way of putting it. But in some ways, what he was saying there is what I was trying to say to you, which is, it is a socialist system that all sectors of society have embraced. I.e., this is a policy that isn't just us kind of like saying, you know what I mean? And what I'm saying to you is it kind of now spans, it's the consensus. People of all political views think that healthcare should be provided in this way. So we've kind of won that argument. And so my point was that the Labour Party now shouldn't be fearful of kind of defending that principle and defending that system, because what we'll find is that people of all political views will back it because they support it. It's why Danny Boyle could celebrate it at a moment like the Olympic Games, because everybody buys into that notion. And you're right, and I don't disagree with you. This is an attack by the right on the principle of the NHS, without a doubt. This is the 65th anniversary year. What have they done all year? They've been running it down all year. Running it down all the time. Nurses are uncaring. GPs are lazy, hospitals are coasting, all the time. And it is all about creating this climate in which privatisation becomes, oh well, we have to, it's not working, it's broken, privatisation. That's what they're doing. And yeah, I mean, I'm accepting, aren't I? I'm saying that we haven't done enough to kind of put our colours to the mast and have some courage in our, of our convictions. But that's what I have been. I mean, I did lead.
You have to stop apologising for Milburn and everyone. Let them do it when they stand on the platform. Let the rest of the Labour Party stop apologising. What you're doing is what you're doing. But the rest of the Labour Party is what raised the feelings.
I did fight the bill. I mean, I thought we did a drop the bill campaign where we did we threw everything at trying to get that bill stopped, and we nearly did, with the help of union colleagues as well. And there's a march, isn't there? Sunday the 29th, Tory conference. And I'll be there, and I'm glad they let me speak there. I'll be there.
Well, that was a discussion.
I know it was.
But I won't do it on camera.
I know it was a discussion. I know maybe some people didn't want it, and maybe some people won't want it. But I'll be there because Labour's got to lead the fight for the NHS. Simple as that. And whatever people, we are. If people undermine us so that we can't win an election, then it is going to get scattered to the four winds, isn't it? No one else is going to save it. The Liberal Democrats aren't.
Thank you, Chair. Tom Fowles, retired. I used to be full-time branch secretary in Burley branch many years ago, and with 9 people on that branch committee, all Labour Party members. Within 10 years, it was bereft of Labour Party members, obviously because Tony Blair was in power. He abandoned Clause 4 and he abandoned the working class to that extent. Now, if we are going to get the NHS to where it should be, obviously it's got to be funded, and there's not enough money at the moment to be funded. And yet we see, huge companies, who will not pay the taxes, tax evasion, things like that. What the Labour Party are going to do, to put an halt to that in order to get some finances in to mend the NHS.
Well, for all the faults of the last government, we did do that, as I said before. The NHS got massive increases in investment. If you remember, we had a debate in the early part of the last decade where we got Derek Wanless do this thing, the Wanless report, where we basically said to the country, we're going to need to raise national insurance if we want the NHS that you want. And at the time, there was a lot of nervousness about that. We did it, and national insurance was raised by about a penny, I think it was at the time, and then the money really did come in. So we did do it, to be fair. We did have that argument. But again, I'm not dismissing what you say, because my critique, if you like, of New Labour, and I was there serving as a foot soldier throughout that time. When I kind of lived through it, and I got towards the back end of our time in government, it was one of the reasons why I stood for the party leadership, being honest with you, because I had become myself. I saw the party getting too close to big business, too close to the establishment, and in the end, at times I think it was kind of forgotten what it was about. We're lucky, aren't we, to have Margaret Aspinall here today and Sue from the Hillsborough Family Support Group. I'll say this, I've said this to them privately, I'll say it to all of you. If some in our party weren't so desperate to get close to the Murdoch empire, maybe we would have called out, or we'd have heard a whole city, actually our city, crying injustice. I mean, we didn't, did we? And by the end of that time in government, I had people had seen that, that kind of thing, and that's what you learn from, isn't it? I mean, I would say back to you that we won 3 elections, and you've got to reach out, haven't you, to win. You've got to carry more than just your own supporters with you if you're going to win, and then put policies into practice. That is absolutely true.
But you have power that principle.
Well, that's the point, though, isn't it? But you do that without losing what you're all about. And at times, I think people looked at us and thought, "What are they all about?" When people here were saying justice and we weren't listening, that is in the end, what we got to. And I did see it, and others did see it as well. But that, in the end, is the lesson, isn't it? And actually, the public want political parties that don't lose themselves or going to, you know, that because then what you're left with what is it that you're left with if you kind of chase, you know, the big business, the media, the establishment, whatever. And I think as I said, we did that too far, and we lost a sense of, we had an identity crisis by the end, you know, by the end of our time in government. So, an honest answer, but in the end, you know, Labour values did shape the country for the better, in my view, in those years. The minimum wage, a lot of things we did, we easily just take for granted now, but they were big changes. Restoring the NHS, you know, rebuilding a lot of the kind of fabric. The North West, if you think about it, was in dire state in the 90s in terms of its infrastructure and its prospects. Liverpool, Manchester, the whole of the North West improved considerably, I would say, during our time. So, yeah, we got a lot of things wrong, but we got a lot of things right as well. But we learned from that, and we come back with a stronger offer next time.
Billy Golding, Plant Secretary, Water Industry. Andy, I've heard a lot of what you said today, and appreciate you coming in to talk to us. However, what I want to hear on behalf of my members in the industry, well, all our members, is when the Labour Party going to stand up and speak up on our behalf, and not Ed being scared of saying anything and arguing with Cameron. I never heard Ed challenging Cameron about the business funding him, their party. So when are we going to see the Labour Party start defending the working class?
I think the time's coming, isn't it? You know, where look out this conference next week. I mean, I think that I don't have all the inside track on everything's going to be announced, but I think you're going to see some stuff that hopefully your members will respond to. You know, some policies. I hope there'll be more said about the bedroom tax. Paul mentioned that a minute ago. I hope there'll be more said about other things, 0 hours contracts, other things that people can start to say, right, these are commitments. I don't think, I know it sounds like an excuse, but when you come out of government, you come into opposition, it's quite a hard thing, because you've got to try and reassess what happened in government as well as then bring a new agenda forward. It's quite a hard thing to do. If you look back at Labour's history, first-term Labour oppositions have been shambolic, haven't they? And if you think back to the last time we were a first-term opposition, the early 80s, well, we badly let down people at that point because we were fighting each other, and that left people.
We're badly letting down people now.
Well, you can have your view about that, obviously, but and I said myself in the summer that we needed to do much more to shout louder for people. The point is a fair point, which is that when you've got two parties of government, as we've got at the moment, people who are on the receiving end of what they're doing really need the other party to speak up for them, don't they? Because there's not another. And I take that point entirely. But judge us by what comes forward, by what policies we bring forward. That's the. And we are in a position to win. We're more united than we were in times gone by. Judge us by what starts to come forward. And politics is never perfection, is it? And there's always going to be. You're never going to have the perfect political party that says everything that you. It's not going to be like that, is it? But at the end of the day, we've got to do more to give your members something to vote for. But also, people have got to say, well, we've got to go with the best alternative is, and quite frankly, another 5 years of this is a disaster, isn't it?
I understand that, Andy, but...
Billy, you're not in the limelight there.
Go on.
Arthur Moss, I work for the Liverpool City Council. Got two questions, one based on the NHS, one based on you being an MP. I'll start with the MP.
I'll leave now.
I'll start with the MP one. The Labour Party promised a lot at the last general election, and they actually didn't deliver anything as far as our members are concerned. We have been hammered in Liverpool to the tune of millions, hundreds of millions have been taken from our budgets, and we've lost thousands of jobs. Will the Labour Party, if they get back in power, reverse that decision and give us some money? We were hammered. Didn't see people running around the city. I didn't see them coming up here and saying you're hard done to. We went down to London. What is the Labour Party going to do for us in that position? Now, come to the NHS part of it. You as the shadow minister, you've talked and you touched on it, a penny on the tax. You're going to say you want a joined up service where the whole health service from, well, cradle to the grave, is it called? That's what they used to call it, right? Now, we in Liverpool are about to go into, with the NHS, some sort of partnership. What's it going to cost? Don't pussyfoot round it. What's it going to cost? Because it's going to cost billions. You need to be out there telling the people what's going to, and how you're going to raise that, not just do the tax.
All right. Again, I think the question's a little unfair. I
do apologise. I am slightly conservational.
You're entitled, and you're entitled to be. But
So I would have gagged him, but he let me.
I think it doesn't, again, recognise, look at what the City of Liverpool got through our 13 years in government. Just look at the funding that came in through direct funding from central government to the council, but also generally across the... I promise you, it was a lot of money. And it was because we had a system of allocating money to local government based on deprivation and based on need. And they immediately changed it. So the cuts that came to local government straight after the election were disproportionate. I think this city lost about, was over £100 for every man, woman, child who lives here. 200, more. I remember it was like Kingston or Richmond or somewhere, £13, or Winchester. Minuscule amounts compared to what we were getting. Did we make enough of a fuss about it? Well, I remember going around, we did, but
I actually don't, and I agree, you do.
But we could do. But I'd take your point. We could do.
The other fella sat there with his finger up his jacket.
We could. Wait, you're on tape here. Can you turn that round so that we get the fella with the jacket?
We could do more. We could always do more. We could shout louder. But I think we are doing. To be honest, they're doing the same in the NHS. They're reallocating funding so it goes to follow age rather than need, and money's starting to drift south, and that's what they do, isn't it? So we did do things to get fairer funding, but as ever we could do more. On your second question, you might remember before the last election I proposed something along these lines. It was called a National Care Service, and basically what I suggested was a 10% levy on what people leave behind to pay for fully free social care. Now, my dad always says to me, we'll do it from general taxation. And in an ideal world, if you had the 1948 moment again, I think you would do it from general taxation. You would pay for social care in the same way. But the problem is, we've had 65 years where that hasn't been how we funded social care. And I say back to my dad, you might think you have, but you haven't paid through your taxes for social care. So it really isn't fair to go to younger people who can't get on the housing ladder, who've got university tuition fees, who are finding life hard, to say, oh, by the way, there's another thing you've got to pay for now, which is your mum and dad's social care. So that is why I think now you have to do it differently. You have to do it by asking this current generation of older people to pay differently, rather than being left to pay randomly, because that's what's happening at the moment. Rather than death taxes, as the Tories claimed I wanted at the last election, we've got something worse, dementia taxes, haven't we? Because basically, that's what care charges are. Yeah. They seek out the vulnerable, and the vulnerable pay the most, and the vulnerable lose everything. If you get Alzheimer's, you lose the whole lot. And when ageing is the big issue, that makes this question the same as medical care pre-NHS, where families were wiped out by the costs of healthcare. Now families are wiped out by the costs of ageing. And I'm saying that that's the way to do it. And if you built a system like that, everybody could pay a proportion of what they've got, but then protect the vast majority of what they've worked for. And I think that is a policy that I think kind of wins, really, because people then, you're appealing to the kind of collective side of things. Everybody's protecting each other. But also you're protecting people's legitimate aspirations to hold on to their home and to pass on their home. So the answer is, it was modelled before the last election at a 10% levy on all estates. 10% would have paid for a national care service. And the thing about it is, I know the Tories and the Daily Mail would just come and rip into it. But the point that I would put back to them, I mean, this isn't party policy, by the way, I'm just kind of saying that these are the ideas I'm putting forward. The point that I would put back to them is, well, here's a question to you. How many people in this country pay inheritance tax? Do you know what that is at the moment? Have a guess.
I'm not in that league.
You're not probably, no.
I don't know, you'd have a few bets coming.
It's about 5%. So 95% of estates in this country don't pay inheritance tax. But the reason why they don't get anywhere near the inheritance tax threshold is because they are shredded by the costs of care in later life. So their money goes in later life. So I'm saying, completely reverse that. Have a kind of simple charge at the end of life. So all of your care can be free at the point of use while you're alive. You don't have that horrible thing of taking control of your mum or dad's bank account and starting to pay for the weekly care charges. That is a depressing thing, isn't it, for any family? So it is costed. It's a better way of doing things. And it's not, for me, people will have to pay anyway, won't they? You either let them pay randomly through charges or pay through a fairer collective system. And I'm saying let's go for the latter. And people will, again, support it.
Well,
I just want to say a few things because I think the answer is in what you said, Tommy. You know, there's enough money sloshing about overseas that we should take in tax and corporate tax off every big player that won't pay to pay for the NHS and everything else. And yesterday I was with a group of European shop stewards, Andy, and I'll tell you what they asked every one of them. He said, how do you allow the City of London to do what they do? Pay no corporation tax, pay no taxes, flee abroad. Because the one thing that they fear, and these were high-ranking shop stewards in the biggest companies across Europe, they said, we fear the City of London and what they can get away with for our jobs. That's what they said. We don't fear anything else, that's what we fear. Because they seem to... And I remind them in Luxembourg and other areas what they do. They have the same problem, Holland, but they all said, all our money flees to the capital of London and then they put it somewhere else, our investment money. And they were concerned about that, so, well, now you know how concerned we are. But in fairness to Andy, and look, I'm not just going to say this, he's the first one ever to be in here, and people will tell you, that I've ever brought in to address people. He's the first one since I've been a regional secretary. And that's because I know how passionate he is about the health service. I'm going to stick my neck out. I believe if they were like it, they'd deliver it like that. What I fear is for Andy. I fear for Andy. Because he's saying not just the right thing, he means it. He means it. And you know, I know you're asking him questions, but he can't do it on his own. Comes down to what Ray said before. He's going to need help. He's going to need us putting pressure on people that have never had pressure put on them before to deliver the NHS. I believe the NHS, social care in one go, is the most fundamental thing that if we can't keep campaign on and fight for, we may as well go all home ourselves. It's the one common denominator we all have in this country. Birth and death, and in between, the NHS. Delivers from the beginning to the end and everything else. We can't do it, we keep allowing. And he's apologising actually, by the way, for Milburn and everyone else. Because we met Milburn, me and Dougie, on many occasions. And that was his idea. More and more and more. More and more feet in the door. More and more money. And we keep consistently asked the Labour Party, and Dougie says it, the old and the bold that used to be in the hospitals for 25 years was suddenly privatised. And what happened? Infection went up overnight. Because people are passing through to clean hospitals, their care's not there. What happens with social care? People weren't there in the home. They weren't there to look after Aunt Betty or Julie because they knew them. They were wiped out because 0-hour contracts, and the common denominator was the cheapest person to walk in this door to look after that person for the minimum amount of time, which Andy touched on. He's one of the very, very, very few people that genuinely actually believes his brief. Others are given briefs and run with it, and that's why they move on. But he actually believes. He believes this is achievable. He believes it can be all put back. And to be honest, yeah, it's music to my ears. And we can only assist them. And all of those sorts of, like, people that you said, neoliberals even in the Labour Party, they have to be, you know, argued with and told. We cannot continue on down this road with you. But the NHS is the most fundamental thing that we should be standing on and saying the NHS is not for sale. But he's told you the scale of it. Every single day we're getting things coming through on the computer. I've got staff here and I've got people at work in and haven't I? Demoralised. The blood service. People will tell you from the ambulance service, Andy, what happens? They're sitting round waiting because there is no beds. That's not their policy. That's someone deliberately doing this. That's someone saying we could do this cheaper with Serco, G4S and everybody else. But the one thing I will defend about Andy, and by the way, we were the only GMB region that voted for him. And had the argument internally behind closed doors that he was actually saying something that he believed in. When he stood up, he believed in what he was saying. And I honestly believe that the health service would be safe in his hand and we could get them reversed if he was around. And I hope he stays around.
We don't have any more questions, but it is ironic when you think about it today, what today is. Do you know what today is? Anybody know what today is? The first district nurses in the country were started 125 years ago today.
You didn't know that?
And if you go to the corner of Parliament Street, shut up! If you go to the corner of Parliament Street, opposite the Rialto, you will see the district nurse.
Right.
That's where they started.
Right.
Is there any burning questions that anyone needs to ask?
Lisa's got to come in.
Hang on, well, George has been waiting to come in. Right.
Hi, thanks very much. George Patterson, I'm an organiser with the GMB, I believe. Yeah. Andy, week last Sunday, you were on the BBC News. What you said was, it's with regards to the trade union funding of the Labour Party. You said Ed Miliband has done the right thing, and also you said there's no backing down from the principle of modernising the link. I know Ed Miliband addressed the CUC last week. He was brave enough to do that. But I still believe that, honestly, you are being naive in the decision that's been made. You said earlier with regards to the privatised companies who have funded the Tory party. Also, they've got contracts within the NHS. The only funding, really, that you had was through the trade unions. Now, you may well say the GMBs took the opportunity not to give you what they normally give you, or, you know, we've been forced, I'd say we've been forced not to give you the funding that we would like to give you, but that's where we are. What we've also got is, I'm an officer for the Public Services, Liverpool City Council. I've had members who've said to me, because of the austerity measures, I've got to drop out the union, I've got better things to do with me £11 a month. What do you want, and bearing in mind, public sector workers over the last 3 years have not had a pay increase. For the 3 years before that, they had an under-inflation increase. So for the past 6 years, they haven't had really any increase whatsoever. So what do you believe, as a Labour Party, people would actually maybe contemplate dropping out the trade union, which they get value for money for, and pay £40 a year into, you know, the Labour Party as a standalone member, because that's what you're looking for. You're looking for people to be Labour Party members within their own right. So where do you believe that people will be paying £40 into the Labour Party every year?
I said at the beginning, didn't I, that I defend the link, and I think we need to make a robust case for it, because I say in a world where there's not going to be state funding, and I wouldn't want to go out there and argue for it, a mechanism that raises a little bit from a lot of people has got to be the best way, hasn't it? The best way to fund any political, because so therefore no party's kind of beholden to one big interest. But the key is there, isn't it? Making sure that a lot of people have really opted into that principle. Now, I don't know, I'm not an expert in all the internal ways in which this is done, but UNIS and my union, I think have operated always a slightly different system, haven't they? And I'm led to believe the CWU have operated a slightly different opt-out, or they've had a different way. Surely between, the thing I would say is, let's not let's find a way of making it more open, modern, transparent, but don't throw away the history. Because then if we've done that, then we can really, with all kind of power, say to the other side and look at where you get your money from. You can ask those questions. So we mustn't. I don't think this isn't. We can do this. We can solve this between us. It seems to me. All it is about a system that is about people knowingly kind of contributing to knowing what they're contributing for, being absolutely clear about that. If we can demonstrate that, then the link is updated for the times that we're in, and then we've got moral authority to look at others the way other political parties are funded. You know, I completely, you know, I understand what everyone's saying. I mean, I don't know, you know, I'm going to need to go in a minute, Chair, but I really appreciate, obviously, what Paul said. I mean, I do appreciate that. I don't expect you to agree with everything that, you know, I'm saying today. You know, definitely, you know, you express your views, your misgivings about Labour policy. But, you know, I am and would say, let's not, you know, let's stick together, basically, and keep, you know, we need to do more to give you things that kind of you can go back and say, well, look, you know, they're doing that. I understand that. I completely hear that and I understand it. But at the same time, you know, what happens when we divide is that they stay in for a long time, isn't it? That's what happens. That's what history tells us. So don't let, you know, let's not let that happen. Because I look at this lot, you know, I heard Clegg this week, you know, unbelievable, you know, like reinvent, you know, trying to claim that absolutely nothing, you know, nothing to do with him. You know, he privatised the NHS. He's allowed the NHS to be privatised, tuition fees to be trebled, the bedroom tax to come in. I mean, you could carry on, couldn't you? But, oh, it's all fine because he's going to launch the war on plastic bags. Well, thank you very much for that, Mr. Clegg. It's, you know, he has allowed what I believe to be a government as right-wing, if not more, than the Thatcher government. It's as bad. And if Cameron wins with a majority, just think what that would be like. Think what's going to be left of the NHS come 2020. And, you know, I know we're not, I'm not saying we're perfect. I know you'll have your doubts. But I'm pleased what Paul said. I am genuine about what I believe in when it comes to the NHS. If we don't win in 2015, what would be left to glue back together in 2020? You know, what will be left of it? It is that important. And you know, the rally I think is going to be a really big moment, really, in kind of waking up the country to what's going on. I don't know. You know, let's stick together. Let's work.
One more question, Andy.
Yeah,
Jeff.
Andy, now that Vince Cable has apparently seen the light that says we can't rebuild the country based on the dilution of workers' rights, what's your position on employment legislation, the Jackson reforms, and this enterprise and regulatory bill that's coming in on 1st of October, which wipes away 100 years of health and safety regulation, 100 years of health and safety protection for workers in the workplace, in the NHS workplace. I'm a lawyer for the GMB, represent the GMB members in the workplace, GMB members in the NHS. I'd just like to know what the Labour position is. Are they going to jump on Cable now and say, well, you introduced them all? Apparently now he's saying it can't be.
It's short, it's costing us money.
That's right, that's right. On a discounted rate today, you know.
Just ask the question.
Yeah. Well, what's your position on repealing the employment legislation that 2 years before you've got any rights? The Jackson reforms which denied access to justice, and the enterprise and regulatory bill, particularly the section 69 of it, which does away with all the rights of workers to sue under breaches of the health and safety regulations that were brought in over 100 years. Are you going to say today that you will want to repeal that?
I'm going to sound like a politician, and I am a politician.
Not to do
with
me.
That isn't. I can't. You know, they're not my policy areas. I can talk about my own area, but you know, obviously all the work.
Well, there's people in the NHS who have to suffer these consequences.
But what you're right about is that there's a kind of systematic campaign on here, isn't it, to chip away at people's security
and it's
in the workplace.
Hey, I know you're a lawyer.
And in the NHS,
Said you're in court.
we need to look really closely at what's happening to TUPE, don't we? What's going on there? Because they're just forget. I've seen examples where staff have been transferred and the companies just said, oh, forget that. We don't do it. You know, it's almost being made redundant just by practice, isn't it? People are just saying, forget it. We're not.
What are you going to do about it?
Well, okay, that's. I'll raise it with the person who's responsible. But you know, generally, we need policies, I think, that protect that bottom third that I spoke about before. You know, policies around 0 hours and eradicating that culture. Policies around the living wage, which I think we should bring through. You know, one of the most outrageous things they've done is this rights for shares thing. I mean, it's absolutely